It's time to get your checking account to zero with free checking from PenFed. That's zero ATM fees, zero balance requirements, and zero time spent waiting for your paycheck to direct deposit because you can receive it up to 2 days early. Open your account with just $25 and see how big zero can be. Apply online today at PenFed.org/free checking. Early direct deposit eligibility may vary between pay periods and timing of payers' funding. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
Before we get started with the episode, I want to give a thank you to everyone who has bought my book, Beyond the Hunt, which was released earlier this spring, and let everybody in the Anchorage area know that I will be at Double Shovel Cider Company June 9th from 4 to 7. Going to have some books there for sale, both my my recent book, Beyond the Hunt, and also A Miserable Paradise Life in Southeast Alaska. So would love to chat and talk hunting and fishing and all things Alaska with anybody in the Anchorage area June 9th from 4 to 7 at Double Shovel Cider Company. If you've already bought a book, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. If you haven't, I will have some signed copies available and looking forward to seeing you there. Welcome back to the podcast. My guest today is Matt Boline. He's the Southeast Alaska Community Engagement Manager for Trout Unlimited. Thanks for being on here, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you work for Trout Unlimited, but let's go back in history a little bit. Do you remember your first trout?
Ooh, boy. My very first one, I believe it was a steelhead on the Knife River on the North Shore of Superior.
Oh, okay. So Michigan action there.
Minnesota. Yeah,
Minnesota, okay.
I grew up near the start of the Mississippi, so I was exposed to trout and salmon on Lake Superior, not really recognizing the difference between hatchery fish and where Pacific salmon are meant to be. But I thought it was pretty cool then, and it's still kind of cool now. But I look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's still really cool. You know, people talk about catching. There's a run of Chinook in there too, right?
Yeah, and like there's cohos and pinks too, and
yeah, might as well. I mean, if you can make it, then might as well. Yeah. So when did you move up to Alaska?
I moved up in 2004 to finish school, and I finished my undergraduate at UAS and did a master's in teaching program, and then got married and had a couple kids and several dogs and a couple houses, and now I've been I feel like I'm a lifelong Alaskan now, but kids are so.
Yeah, I think if you move up here and your adulthood is spent here, that's pretty close to most of your life. You can call it lifelong almost. Yeah. We moved up when I was 5, so I remember. Or there's some pictures of me catching catfish in Kansas, but I don't really have memories of really fishing until I got up here. And so like trout was just, we were trying for salmon.
Yeah.
You're using spinners and then you're catching these trout. Like, gosh dang, so I didn't really have an appreciation for rainbows or cutthroats until later on, especially like when I started fly fishing. I thought, oh man, these things are really, really cool.
Yeah. I think when my deep passion kind of really took off for trout and salmon is when, I was into fly fishing, but never like as serious as I was once I moved to Alaska. And then within a year, I started working as a fly fishing guide, and I did that for 17 years. Some of that time running the business and doing all the paperwork and admin stuff, but still getting out in the field a lot. And yeah, that's what really drove a lot of my passion, and that's what started my involvement with TU initially. So.
Where did you guide?
For Bear Creek Outfitters out of Juneau. So we do, I guess not we anymore, but they do half day and full day fly out trips out of Juneau, fishing all over Chichagof and all of Admiralty, a lot of the mainland, Chilkat Peninsula near Glacier Bay, both sides of Lynn Canal, south past Juneau, kind of a wide swath. So I got a good chance to not only fish in all these places, but see them from the air, flying over at low altitudes, and getting to spend a lot of time with my boots on the ground and taking people fishing, enjoying it myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Was it mostly like off the cruise ship type stuff, or was it people that were going up and booking at a lodge or something like that and flying out?
Yeah, a little bit of both. During the, COVID changed things quite a bit, but 2019 and previous, is probably, a good chunk of the business was cruise ship related. We had contracts with the cruise lines and sold trips through there, but took a lot of independent bookings too. And then post COVID, it's 100% independent bookings, and things from, certain lodges in Southeast that don't specialize in fly fishing. They'd call me up and I'd go out there and take clients from those lodges, or servicing yachts, flying out to really cool faraway places to pick up folks off a yacht and take them fishing someplace. And a lot of DIYers that are looking to come up to Southeast from Minnesota a lot, and Wisconsin and everywhere else around the world, and to go fishing with us for a day and then spend a lot of time fishing the road system in Juneau.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
The stereotype with someone on a yacht would be, I guess there's two stereotypes: either super humble, super nice, and they can just throw money at it in a good way, and they're really appreciative, and then also snobby, uppity, no fish is big enough, it can't be beautiful enough. What was your experience with that?
Probably a little bit of both. I mostly on the humble side. Some of the most wealthy folks, the professional sports teams owners and that sort of thing, those guys are way more humble than I would ever imagine them to be. And some of the folks that you never heard of, those are the ones that tend to be a little bit more snobby, I suppose. But like all together, I think we always got the cream of the crop of tourists coming to Southeast, and I can't say too many bad things about the few times that folks were snobby, those stand out. But more often than not, it's very humble, good people that appreciate getting to be out and learning about the place.
I've never been a guide, but I have some friends that are guides, and they've said that in many cases, athletes tend to be pretty good because they understand that they have to learn this skill in order to be good at it. They understand that it's not just a matter of showing up and being good. So they love the challenge. They love being new and working through stuff, and they'll listen to the feedback. But yeah, still, man, as a teacher, taking my summers and also teaching people how to fish, man, I like having those summers to myself so I can just do what I want to do, man. It'd be tough, but yeah, I do get the teaching thing.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I'd say that's been my experience too. And a lot of times it's the beginners that tend to be pretty good listeners too, because it's all new to them. And or the person that a lot of times spouses will try to help their spouses, and that doesn't work out so great, and then they hear somebody else telling them, and that works out a lot better. So
yeah, for sure. So what's the road system like up there? I know that you got a couple rivers up there, and you have a terminal run of Kings. Is there quite a bit to keep you busy up there? Is it pretty crowded at the available spots? It's down here in Ketchikan. There's a few spots on the road system, and they just get kind of hammered. And if you have a skiff, you can get out to some outlying type stuff. But what's the fishing like up there?
Oh, I mean, I think it's pretty great. I mean, you could fish only the road system, and you'd think you had a really great year. I mean, when you get out in a skiff or an airplane to a remote spot, the fish are going to be a little more wild because they probably have never seen a fly before, and probably bigger fish. But it's pretty good fishing. Like right now in Juneau, you could fish pretty much anywhere on the shoreline and find dollies at the mouths of creeks, and just roaming up and down the Gastineau Channel. King fishing opens up this week on the 1st. That one's a terminal harvest, but all the way out the road, at the end of the road, at Echo Cove, for all the way to the other end of the road at Thane, and all around Douglas Island, there's tons of great places. Right in the center of Mendenhall Valley is Montana Creek, which it's very, very underrated, amazing river with a lot of different species of salmon, good coho runs. It's steelhead are listed on the anadromous waters catalog, great dolly fishing, lots of humpies and chum too, and there you get occasional kings that might have strayed from the hatchery you'll find up there, and those are always kind of a surprise on a 6-weight when you're fishing for dollies. And
yeah,
but it's a really good time, and it's right in the middle of town, so easy to access. Lots of access points. It's the only river that we have where you can shuttle, get dropped off upstream and fish down to another vehicle and drive back up. And so yeah, it's a pretty great creek.
It's pretty interesting to have that right in town feel if it's good fishing because it seems too accessible. But then you think, all right, if I go back far enough, this is just the way it was. Everything
Yeah.
we're not talking about terminal runs or hatchery runs. It was all this is just what it was. So the original people who were here benefited from it. The first settlers came up, they benefited from it. It must be unbelievable to live here 150, 200 years ago.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think even, yeah, not pretty recently, the road system in Juneau wasn't that developed out in that area too. So like, historically speaking, it's a pretty new access to the river. So yeah.
Are you seeing more people coming up here to fish the road system? I know there's a steelhead river that's very well known in Southeast Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really on the radar, and a lot of people fly there and go fish it. But have you seen more people going to maybe Juneau or some of these other areas for fishing, especially
Yeah.
steelhead?
Yeah, well, yeah, a lot of steelheaders. We don't have the volume of that river, but we have a lot of different runs that are all that could be, some of them might be less than 10 or less than 20, up to 50 or 100 or 200. But there's a lot of steelhead streams around here, and typically like my guide season or my personal fishing season, it's all good. It's all about run timing. So I'll have might have a great day on one river and then move to another river the next day, and it might be just a couple days behind, but you could definitely hop around to different places and make a really, really great steelhead trip and be able to fish lots of different river systems along the way. Just have to have time and access to, a ride to get there,
Yeah.
basically.
I convinced a buddy of mine from California to come up, and it was based on the previous 2 years had been winter had kind of ended and things started to crawl out of it, and we had some nice warm water, and the water was up, and so the fish were in there, and so I convinced him to say, "Hey, man, come up at this time," and he came up, and winter had held on, and we got two steelhead the first day, and then the water just dropped, and it was really cold, and fish hadn't really moved up yet, and so the run was about 2 weeks late, and I was like, man, I
Yeah.
feel kind of bad because not that you want to get every single fish that's there, but there's a chance some of those weekends you can have it can be a volume fishery where you're catching, a number of them. It's not
Mhm.
1,000 casts necessarily, but things are so different down here because southeast outside of your mainland rivers, these rivers don't drain at the same acreage as some of those mainland rivers that have just a tremendous amount of volume and resident fish and everything. So, like you said, it's if you get a good rain, then you can be in good shape for a few days. But then
Mhm.
they move up, they move out. They do the things pretty quick. So, how have you noticed variation in timing? Is there like a certain weekend that you really look at and it's been pretty good? If you look, second week in April is usually really, really good, or is it, any time in April, or what do you got for time?
I think like the northern panhandle, like more inside, it's more May, like a mid-May thing. Like I usually would tell people like May 5th through the 15th is kind of the peak window. But it does vary from year to year. Like there's one steelhead stream that we land in a lake and fish down, and that lake we couldn't land in until the end of June last year because it was so cold and the ice was so thick. Whereas the previous year I was fishing there on like May 1st. So it does change like that a little bit, but yeah, I think the northern, more interior rivers are later. Some of those places are different too, where I've talked to old timers on Chichagof that say they don't even start steelhead fishing till June. But even up a little further north in Yakutat, you might be fishing in March
Mhm.
and having good really good fishing some years. I've been up there way early before other people and had some of the not some of like the best fishing days of my life for steelhead. So yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy when you look at some of those rivers down in California or Oregon. Actually, more. I don't even know about California anymore at all. But
Yeah.
legendary rivers in Oregon and Washington, and you read some people from the 50s and 60s, and you think, man, so many fish and so many fish, and you didn't have to compromise on climate because it was nice and it's warm. California is such an amazing place, climate wise, but resource wise, it's just there's nothing left. It's less than crumbs. But then you can come up here and you can still have those days where it's on, and the rivers are so much smaller and more intimate, and you can have, it's just, they're all right here. It's not, okay, I'm going to have to make these really, really long casts across massive water, and I have to know how to spay cast in order to make it work, man. Like, you can, jump across some of these little creeks that hold fish, and it's just amazing. The size of fish in some of these things.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite kind of, my favorite way to catch a steelhead would be, a big fish in a really small creek, and had some really great days on creeks that I could have used a 4-foot rod to fish for the day, because you don't really need the switch rod or a 9-footer to do it, but some really great days, and those are some of the most beautiful streams. And I find myself even going to the Sea-Tuck, I'm searching out those places like that within the Sea-Tuck in order to find fish the way I want to find them sometimes. And that's nothing, not much better than that.
Yeah, there's a weird transition that happens when you want to get as many fish as possible, and you really like that, but then you really start to value fish on your own terms. And there's a spot here in Ketchikan that's everybody knows about. That's where everybody fishes. And I just don't like fishing it because there's going to be a lot of people there, and there's the best spot to stand, but then someone is going to be above you, or someone's going to drop in below you. And I don't want to have to stand in the same spot. I want to feel like it's just not a matter of throwing casts out there. I want to be able to kind of find one and look at the water and see how I'm going to make a cast to it. When you are in some of those little rivers, how do you approach that? Do you find the fish, and then go upriver, and then just, what's the approach for that? What type of fly are you looking at? Small fly, large fly, colored fly? What's going on?
Yeah, quite a few years ago, I made a trip to buy a vehicle in Seattle, and I drove up and fished the Skeena systems. I purposely gave myself some extra time to do like the Bulkley and Maurice rivers and stuff like that. And down there, the black and blue Dalai Lama is king, and that's when I kind of fell in love with it. So usually my go-to pattern is to fish one way upstream, and then fish something else downstream. So I'll usually, nymph egg patterns, going upstream, and then swing Dalai Lamas going down, and might catch the same fish twice, but it's very productive too. So.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
Yeah.
What kind of rod do you use?
My favorite is I have an Echo 3 switch, a 7-weight, and depending on the river, I like to use a 8-weight floating line sometimes, just when I'm roll casting, and that extra long rod helps you flick a little more line out and reach some places. And then if it's a bigger system, then I'll fish a 2-handed line and go that way. But I'm not as good as some of my friends are at 2-handed casting. So I maybe that's part of my preference for small creeks too, I suppose. Yeah.
I have a 7-weight Sage single hand that I use most of the time, but I really, really like. I have an Echo, a 1010 Echo switch rod, and it's so nice because some of those rivers, with your mend, you can just really get a massive mend into it. Better on the if you do happen to have enough room for back cast, just strip in just a huge toss right back and a forward cast, and just saves your wrist and shoulder and whatnot. And get a lot of control, which is nice when you get some of those larger fish, if it happens to be, and there's a lip and there's some rapids or something like that. So I really, really like my switch rod. So but yeah, my casting is so gross. There's nothing.
The fish don't know what the cast looks like. That's what I always tell people.
Yeah, they don't care as long as you don't splash the water a whole lot. Well, what do you think about splashing the water too much? Do you fish any casts that you throw out there, or are you worried about splashing the water too much?
With steelhead, yeah, but like a lot of the clients that I've taken out have over the years, I'd say out of the maybe several thousand people I've taken fishing, maybe 80% of them is the first time they've ever fly fished at all. It's a bucket list. I saw a river runs through it. I'm in Alaska, and I want to do this. I saw this on offered. I want to do it. And for them, it's the teaching them to cast. I keep it really, really simple. And there's a lot of water loading on the forecast because they don't know how to pause and everything, and they're worried about splashing. But most of these fish, especially in the fly out remote places, they've never seen a fly before. They've never seen line before. The water's moving, and they don't, especially when it comes to like dollies and cuts and salmon, they don't really seem to care. And sometimes the steelhead don't either. You might splash some awful cast in a hole and think, oh, there's no fish in there. And you throw a rock or something in, and you see, a couple, 2 or 3 fish scurry out. And they obviously weren't spooked from the cast. It was the rock.
Yeah. So at some point, you start to, or at least I did, I'm sure a lot of people are too, that you realize that fish aren't endlessly abundant, and you start to realize that, hey, if we want to keep having these things around, we need to make sure that we're not ruining this resource. And you start to pay more attention to what was in California and what was in Oregon and what was in Washington, and think, wow, that might actually, it's not just because we're in Alaska that's not going to happen. So was there a moment for you when you started to worry more about or think more about the consequences of all this attention, all this pressure, all this fishing, and then be a little bit more, want to get more involved in the conservation side of it?
I guess for me, it was actually the local Trout Unlimited staff in Juneau. Before I started working for TU, they were reaching out for some business and supporter stuff, and I did a lot of volunteer work, advocating for and lobbying for the Tonga 77 campaign quite a while ago, and that was a major thing for me once I learned about what the T77 was all about, and how it made me think a lot more about some of those other places, and that's what led me to working for TU eventually. It doesn't take. I mean, I've caught a lot of steelhead in my time, and there's a lot of my friends that have caught way more than I. But now I feel like I'm at the point where, if I go steelhead fishing and one spooks out and I don't get to cast to it, and that might be the only fish I see, for me it's just enough to know they're there. I've played with enough of them and seen enough of them that I don't feel the need to pull them out of the water to appreciate them and enjoy them. So I still like catching them, don't get me wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to be satisfied with like one good fish, and think, oh, this is great. I don't need to catch 7 of them, every single one out of the hole. Every single one has to be photographed, and then do that indefinitely. Not to begrudge anybody who's starting out who loves doing that, because I was the same thing. Because every fish is so unbelievably beautiful, and it's so different, so unique. You just want to remember that. I think a moment for me was when I was a little kid growing up on the Klawak River. I remembered the snags next to the shore and how it was so annoying because you couldn't get to certain areas, you couldn't get to certain angles. And I wish that people would just come in with chainsaws and remove stuff. And people did start doing that stuff. And I thought, well, thank goodness, now we can fish it better. But then I started to realize, and that's where the fish, that they need that that's where they grow up. That's the safe areas for them. That's the habitat for the fry to develop into smolt and then grow. And it's not just a matter of where I want to cast and not getting my flies or my lures snagged up. It's a matter of what's best for the fish. So that was a moment. And then the down south, reading about that was another moment. And the habitat restoration and the habitat preservation is super, super important. Have you fished the Russian River up north?
Not the Kenai, but not the Russian. But yeah, I'd like to at some point.
It's crazy because they have, and people are very annoyed about it. On one side of the river, and I think it's maybe the state owned, or one side of the river is there are these. It's an elevated walkway, and you can only access the river in certain spots where there's stairs. So you can't just walk down the bank because they had to establish, or they had to now replant the whole bank because you need that habitat for the fish. The other side, there's so many people all the time that the bank is just worn down. There's no vegetation on the bank. It's just like this just slope. And you think, oh, this is what happens. If people were allowed to just walk anywhere, you would have no important bank habitat. There would be nothing to preserve the runs. You would have nothing that would, the fish need that habitat. And it was astonishing to me. The people, I expected that. It was pretty crazy with the people, but just, had they not done that, this inconvenient thing for anglers accessing the water, who knows where some of that population would be, because you have to have that. Otherwise the fish aren't going to live to be able to go out to the ocean, to be able to come back.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the work that we're doing right now, actually, with our restoration program, and really getting into that. That's it's kind of a new, it's a transition and focus for TU in the region, where previously it was more about advocacy, and now we're kind of joining the ranks of a lot of the TU chapters and programs in the lower 48 of restoration is a big priority right now. A lot of that comes from the Forest Service new initiative, and look at the way they are approaching the forest, with the priorities beyond on restoration, recreation, and resiliency. To fix what's been broken, make sure that people can have fun and getting out recreating or subsistence fishing, and at the same time preserving those streams so they're resilient to effects of climate related issues like mudslides, and we don't really have forest fires in the Tongass quite yet, but just a couple of years ago in those drought times, there's some serious threat, and infestation from bugs and like the budworms and that sort of thing. Like there's a lot of things that are threats to the forests, and so that's the new direction for the forest. It's the Southeast Alaska Sustainability Strategy, that was really a twofold. There are two main components of that. One being the reinstating the roadless rule, which happened recently, and the other part is the sustainability strategy of getting folks together, speaking with communities and locations on prioritizing rivers based on the need of the community, businesses, subsistence, recreational use, all that kind of thing, and trying to really capture what those communities want, like the villages, and even Ketchikan and Juneau, the bigger cities as well, and we're a pretty big part of that, and trying to get people together and weigh in on what they think should happen with the forest, and be know what's going on right now too. So I've been doing a lot of business outreach and community outreach to inform folks and let them know what's going on, and hopefully they'll get involved in the process.
Yeah, it's everything is a lot closer here. Someone who is a commercial fisherman, someone who's a charter fisherman, and sometimes those people are at odds. Someone, or a family who is either in logging or was in logging. Someone who is maybe in resource extraction, like mining. Like it's very, very close. It's not some sort of someone else out there, some face that I can't even recognize, like and so it's really important to have that sort of input and
Yeah.
feedback so it can be used in a responsible sort of way. The old logging practices and a lot of the old mining practices, it's not going to work. We're not going to be able to have both things. We're not going to be able to both have responsible, sustainable logging or we have to try for responsible logging. We can't just do some of those old practices that were just destroying the habitat for the fish. We shouldn't be in a position where you have to choose either logging or fish. We have to figure out a way to be able to coexist.
Yeah, and and things, what we know has changed a lot too, like what you were talking about, pulling, it wasn't that long ago that the Forest Service, they were telling the loggers that they needed to pull these trees out, or the Forest Service was doing it themselves, was pulling the trees out of the river, because at the time that's what was thought to be the best way. And now we're going around to these rivers and installing logs and pulling trees down with root wads into streams to help create habitat that wasn't able to be created because of the last 20 years of clear cuts in near the stream corridors. So there's no trees to fall into them in some places. So yeah, and getting those communities to not only weigh in but to take part in the process too has been really great and really cool. To not only that the Forest Service is seeking that out, but that people are joining and being a part of that process.
Yeah. Moving forward together is going to be so important. I mean, there could be a
Yeah.
lot of finger pointing if you went back in that, if you were really interested in finger pointing, you could do that for a long time. See, Alaska did a lot of logging, and they've adjusted and they've moved to more kelp sustainable farming, and that's great. Good ideas are good ideas regardless of where they come from. So listening and working with people is important going forward, rather than being just a consumer.
Yeah, and if you vilify, every single person involved in logging and don't listen to them, then you might be missing out on some, not only a key piece of information or historical knowledge, but a lot of those folks that with logging experience are the same folks that are being hired now to do restoration work,
Mhm.
right? Because that's the restoration economy is it's real, and there's money for it, and there's jobs available, and whereas in a lot of those places the logging jobs just aren't there anymore.
Mhm.
So they can still use those skills that they learned. And and sometimes we're Trout Unlimited with other partners is putting together workshops to teach people to use the chainsaw winches and the strategies for restoration in a way that they can be useful, and train other folks, and do the restoration work in their backyards, literally. So
Yeah, I remember growing up in Klawock, uh, tons of logging was going on in Prince of Wales. Kaufman Cove and Thorn Bay were just logging towns. But when the logging went out and the pulp mills shut down in Ketchikan in 1996, I think, um, those communities had to adjust and pivot. And Kaufman Cove is a thriving little community, which is great to see. People thought that there would be nothing left because logging is going out. There's nothing worth saving. There's no reason to be there. Same thing with Thorn Bay. So they've had to adjust. And for a lot of people, it's been good. Like you said, there's
Mhm.
other opportunities that come. It's not a matter of this is gone and there's not going to be anything else. A lot of people in Ketchikan too were able to pivot from the pulp mill logging industry into different avenues. And now we're, you know, just totally at the mercy of the tourism uh,
Mhm.
in cruise ships. And so there's going to we're going to have conversations about the sustainability of that and how many people can we really actually have in here, because it's not resource extraction, but it is resource use, and how much is too much. Was there a ballot measure or something up there where Juneau was considering capping the tourists per day or per year or something?
Yeah, there was a movement by a group in Juneau to try to cap that, but I think the the goals for that group might not have they might have been pretty far off of what the goals of the tourism um, groups had, and so it's hard to find a compromise there. But I think that this it was the minority as well, but yeah, there was a movement, and it did, it opened up debate and discussion about it,
Mhm.
right? And people are thinking about it now, and They might look at a year like this year where, we're slated to get the most cruise ship passengers ever, and they might, have some difficulties and come back and realize like, yeah, maybe we do have too many. Or, conversely, maybe it gives lots of, some other folks an opportunity to create new business ideas that can, and that's, approach a different area of the forest and use it in a different way that nobody else is doing. And, then we could have a bigger, a little bit more broad, multi-use forest.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What would you recommend for someone who likes to fish? How can they get involved? What would you recommend be a first step for them for maybe taking some responsibility for the resource going forward?
Fish handling is key, especially when we're talking about steelhead. As much as they are very big, very strong, very impressive species, they're still delicate too. And if you're the way you handle, making sure that you have rubber nets to land them in, and not exposing them to air too long, holding up for pictures over the water, not over rocks or inside your boat. One bounce off the gunnel of your boat might kill a fish that you might have been your only steelhead you've ever caught in your life, or your first one, or most amazing one, or it loses that, you lose that opportunity to tell a story to somebody if you don't handle it right. And
Mm-hmm.
and if you handle it right, the good chances are the next time you go back, there's going to be more of them there to begin with. So yeah, I think fish handling is one thing that folks can get into, and it doesn't take any. It does take a certain amount of skill, but you don't have to like learn how to cast and learn how to tie flies in order to handle fish well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What about as far as organized things? Is there Trout Unlimited events going on? Is there a website to go to, social media, things like that, if they want to take that next step?
Yeah. So for the Tongass campaign, the social media channels are American Salmon Forest. And just last week, no, 2 weeks ago, we had our community casting night here in Juneau, where the Alaska Fly Fishing Goods, that's a local fly shop here in Juneau, run by Brad Alfers.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I've had him on
He's
the podcast a few times.
Yeah, I love Brad. Great dude. He brings a bunch of rods down for folks to try out, and the Trout Unlimited. We have some rods that we can use, and we borrowed some rods from Bear Creek Outfitters, and I believe we had close to 100 people between volunteers and people coming down to learn how to cast at Twin Lakes Park a couple weeks ago, and folks were playing in the playground. They came over and say, "What's this?" I'm like, "Come on, grab a
Nice.
rod." I had a bunch of echo geckos for kids to try out and learn how to cast, and I had some casting competitions for accuracy and distance as well for folks that wanted to try that. And yeah, that was pretty fun. And we've discussed now doing monthly meetups at certain spots in Juneau to do some stream cleanups, and then we'll schedule those around like when the fishing will be good, possibly, or good chances of catching fish in those spots. So do a little river cleanup, and hopefully we'll have a group of people together that can go and fish and learn from each other. There's a lot of new folks that moved to town that I met this winter during our Bar Flies events that is hosted with the local chapter, as well as Alaska Fly Fishing Goods does a lot of work to help us out with that. So monthly we're meeting at different bars around Juneau and having these bar fly events. And I led a handful of them. Some other folks led the tying at those nights, and we tie a fly, and we have a bunch of vices. And the one night we were the only people in the bar. It was totally dead when we walked in, and by the time I was ready to leave, there's about 150 people in there, and everyone was crowded around all these tables trying to learn how to tie flies and seeing what's going on. Maybe they didn't come for the tying night, but they came in, saw what was going on, and they got interested after that, and might have sat down and tried to learn something. So a lot of those folks, they're asking the same kind of questions you're asking, and that's when we started talking about like getting together once a month for a stream cleanup / fishing opportunity for people to meet new people and learn a new stream and take care of it while we're there.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. It's great stuff. I really appreciate you being on here, taking some time out of your day, and where you're heading fishing next.
Well, I'm actually down in Minnesota right now visiting some family, and we've got plans to fish for some walleye on Ottertail Lake this coming week. So that'll be the next one, and then when I get home, I think I'll be spending a lot of time on my boat catching some kings.
Oh, that's great, man. That's awesome. Well, good luck. Enjoy the lower 48. Get some food that you can't get in Juneau down there. Enjoy it, and then safe travels and have fun catching your kings.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Take care.
You too.